I was 15 years old, standing inside one of the busiest pizza places in my town. Apron already on, flour in the air, ovens roaring behind me, when my boss laughed in my face and made it very clear that what I wanted didn't matter. She thought because I was young, broke and desperate for a paycheck, I didn't have options. She thought I was trapped. What she didn't realize was that the moment she laughed, she gave me something far more dangerous than anger: clarity. I never wanted to work fast food. I wasn't one of those kids, dreaming about minimum wage and grease-stained uniforms. I just wanted a simple job, something respectable, something that didn't make me feel like I was already stuck in life at 15. My first choice had been the local arena. It was clean, professional, and honestly felt like a place where people were treated like humans. I went through the process, did the interview, even got positive feedback. Then came the rule. You had to be 16 to work with certain pool chemicals. I was 15, 1 year short. Call us back in a few months, they said. Months felt like forever. I needed money now. So I swallowed my pride and applied to the busiest pizza place in town. The one everyone knew. The one that was always packed. The one that smelled like dough and grease from half a block away. I didn't like it, but I needed the job. And when you're a kid who wants independence, sometimes you convince yourself that temporary discomfort is worth it. The place was run by a couple of college-aged managers, early 20s, the type who wore authority like a costume they were still learning how to fill. Running a pizza joint had gone straight to their heads. They talked down to people, flexed power over schedules, and acted like supervisors instead of leaders. To them, this wasn't just a job. It was proof they were important. I got hired for kitchen work, the bottom of the ladder. Dishes, prep, cleaning, scraping burnt cheese off pans. The kind of work where no one thanks you, but everyone notices when you mess up. I didn't complain. I worked hard. I showed up early. I stayed quiet. I thought effort would earn respect. That's what adults always tell you, right? About a month in, they pulled me aside and asked if I wanted to learn how to make dough. On the surface, it sounded like a promotion. More responsibility, more trust. But I knew better. Dough wasn't just another task. It was the lifeline of the entire store. If the dough person didn't show up, the place couldn't open. Period. Making dough meant 6 in the morning starts. It meant weekends. It meant non-stop physical labor. Mixing batch after batch, oiling pans, portioning dough, stacking racks, loading speed proofers, transferring to cold storage, repeating the process for 6 straight hours without slowing down. Flour in your hair, arms burning, back aching before most people were even awake. I was 15. I didn't want to give up every weekend of my life, so I told them the truth. I said I'd learn it, but I didn't want to work every weekend. I enjoyed working weeknights. Weekends were important to me. I was clear. I was respectful. I set one boundary. They smiled. They nodded. They reassured me. Don't worry, they said. You'll only do 1 weekend dough shift a month. That promise mattered. It was the only reason I agreed. They made the same promise to my friend Scott. Same age. Same situation. Same words. Scott and I trained together. We learned fast. We took it seriously. And honestly, we were good at it. Too good, reliable, efficient, exactly what they needed. 2 weeks later, the schedule went up. I remember walking up to the board, scanning for my name, already feeling that weird tightening in my chest. Saturday, dough. Scott? Sunday, dough. The next week, same thing. The week after that, same, every single weekend. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Schedules get messed up. People forget things. So I went to my boss, calm, polite, expecting an explanation. What I got instead was laughter. Not nervous laughter. Not awkward laughter. Real laughter. The kind that tells you the joke is you. She said, "Too bad." The other managers overheard and started smirking. Servers in their 20s watched the scene like entertainment. 2 15-year-old kids realizing their promises meant nothing. To them it was funny. They knew we needed the jobs. They knew we wouldn't quit. They knew we had no leverage. That's when it hit me. We weren't employees. We were tools. Cheap labor they could pressure, manipulate, and overwork because they thought we were powerless. Standing there, heat rushing to my face, jaw clenched, I realized something painful but important. Adults don't always protect kids. Sometimes they exploit them because they know they can. I went home that day exhausted, flour still in my hair, hands sore, shoulders aching. My parents could see something was off. And that's when everything changed. Because sitting at the kitchen table, still mentally replaying my boss's laugh, my parents told me the arena had called back. They wanted me to come in for another interview. Suddenly the walls around me didn't feel so tight anymore. The next few weeks blurred together into one long, exhausting routine that made me feel older than I was. Every Saturday morning, while other kids my age were sleeping in, I was waking up before sunrise, pulling on a uniform that still smelled like yesterday's grease, and walking into a building that felt less like a workplace and more like a trap. The lights were always too bright that early, the air always too cold, and the silence before the ovens turned on felt heavy, like the building itself was watching me work. Making dough wasn't hard in a complicated way. It was hard in a relentless way. There was no thinking involved, just repetition. Mix, portion, oil, stack, proof, store. Repeat, over and over until your hands moved on autopilot and your mind had nowhere to escape. 6 straight hours of that. Every weekend, knowing you were lied to, knowing you were being used, does something to you. It builds resentment slowly like pressure behind a dam. Scott and I barely talked at work anymore. Not because we were mad at each other, but because we were tired. Sundays wrecked him the same way Saturdays wrecked me. We'd exchange looks sometimes. Quick eye contact that said everything words couldn't. They screwed us. Yeah, they did. That silent understanding was the only thing that made it bearable. The managers didn't hide it anymore. They'd joke about it openly. "Look at our doughboys," one of them would say, laughing as they walked by. Servers would smirk. Some of them felt bad, I could tell, but none of them spoke up. When you're young, you learn fast that silence is easier for people than fairness. I tried once more to speak up. Not aggressively, not emotionally, calm, respectful. I reminded them of the promise. 1 weekend a month. That's all I asked for. My boss didn't even let me finish. She waved her hand like she was brushing away a fly. "Schedules change," she said. "If you don't like it, you know where the door is." Then she smiled. Not a friendly smile. A knowing one. The kind that says you won't leave. That smile stayed with me longer than the words. Because she was right. At least she thought she was. I needed the job. Or so she believed. She thought I was stuck. She thought I had no leverage. She thought being 15 meant I had no power. What she didn't know was that while she was laughing, something else was quietly lining up in my favor. The second interview at the arena felt like stepping into a different world. Clean floors, calm voices, adults who actually listened when you spoke. They told me they could officially offer me the job the day after my 16th birthday. I remember sitting there nodding, trying not to smile too hard. It felt like oxygen after weeks of suffocating. Then they asked a question that would end everything. "Do you know anyone else who might be interested? We need more help." I thought of Scott immediately. Same age, same work ethic, same situation. I told them about him. How reliable he was, how hard he worked. They told me to have him bring in his resume. They'd take care of the rest. I didn't tell anyone at the pizza place. Not Scott, not my parents, not a single soul. I went back to work the next weekend like nothing had changed. Same 6 a.m. start, same grinding routine, same fake smiles from management. But inside, something was different. The pressure wasn't crushing anymore. It was focused, because now I wasn't trapped. I started noticing details I hadn't paid attention to before. how dependent they were on us, how thin the staff was scheduled, how no one else knew how to make dough properly. Management never came in early. Ever. They relied completely on the dough being ready. When they opened at noon, no backup plan, no contingency, just blind confidence. I realized something important then. Their power over me only existed because I showed up and did the work. That was it. And once you understand that, the balance shifts. The Saturday before my birthday arrived quietly. I woke up that morning calmer than I had been in weeks. No knot in my stomach, no dread, just clarity. I put on my uniform, grabbed my apron, and went in like normal. No one suspected a thing. For 6 hours, I didn't make a single batch of dough. I sat in the booth area drinking chocolate milk. I twirled my thumbs. I watched the clock. I let the building stay silent. No mixers running, no proofers humming, just stillness. It felt surreal, almost peaceful. I was there, clocked in, present, just not producing. When the managers arrived to open, they saw me standing there with my apron folded neatly, name tag in hand. My boss laughed. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I quit," I said. She laughed harder, said they were going to fire me anyway. Said if she were me, she wouldn't have even shown up. She said it would have really screwed her if I hadn't made any dough. I smiled, and that's when I told her the truth. I can still see her face when I smiled. That split second where her confidence cracked. Just enough for confusion to slip through. She was still laughing, still convinced she was in control. Still riding that sense of superiority that comes from thinking, someone has no options. She repeated herself louder this time, saying that if it were her, she wouldn't have even bothered showing up. Because not making dough would have really screwed them. That was the exact moment I knew this was going to land perfectly. I told her calmly, almost casually, "Oh, I did show up." She rolled her eyes, clearly expecting some smart-mouthed teenager response. I continued, "I've been here all morning." Her smile tightened. "And I didn't make any dough." There was a pause, just a half second, but it was enough. Her eyes flicked toward the back, toward the mixers, toward the racks that should have been full, toward the complete absence of anything that resembled preparation. "You still have to pay me," I added. "I was here for my shift." The color drained from her face so fast it was almost impressive. That laugh she'd been holding on to vanished, replaced by disbelief, then panic. She turned and rushed toward the kitchen like maybe, just maybe, dough would magically appear if she checked again. Didn't. Empty racks, cold proofers, silent mixers, 6 hours of nothingness staring back at her. I stood there, oddly calm, watching everything click into place. The realization hit her in layers. First, that there was no dough. Then, that it was already too late to fix it. Then, that she didn't know how to make it herself. And finally, the worst part, that no one else was coming. They'd staffed thin, like always. No extra hands, no backup, no safety net. She tried to recover, started barking orders, telling servers to prep anyway, talking about using day-old dough. But anyone who's worked pizza knows you can't fake it. Day-old dough collapses, comes out flat, and even that wasn't enough to carry a full day of service. Noon was coming fast. The lunch rush, the families, the regulars, the cheap buffet crowd that packed the place wall to wall. I handed her my apron and name tag and walked past her without another word. The door closed behind me, and for the first time in weeks my shoulders relaxed. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel guilty. I felt light, like I'd just put something heavy down. Later that afternoon, Scott texted me. One message. They closed. That was it. No emojis. No celebration. Just confirmation. The store hadn't even made it through the day. No dough meant no pizzas. No pizzas meant no business. Customers showed up to locked doors and handwritten signs. Regulars were confused. Some were angry. All of it was completely avoidable if they'd just kept their word. But it didn't stop there. The next day was Scott's shift, Sunday. Same routine, same setup, same arrogance from management. They clearly hadn't learned. They assumed lightning wouldn't strike twice. Scott showed up early, clocked in, and did exactly what I did. Sat quietly, waited, let time pass. When they arrived, he quit. Same calm tone, same quiet confidence, same devastating result. 2 days, 2 shutdowns, an entire weekend destroyed because they underestimated. 2 kids they thought were powerless. I found out later that management tried to spin it. Told corporate it was a staffing issue. Complained about unreliable teenagers. Took zero responsibility. But everyone in town knew. Word travels fast in small places, especially when the busiest pizza place suddenly can't open. Scott and I started at the arena that week. Together, clean uniforms, fair schedules, managers who treated us like people. We worked there the rest of high school. Every now and then, when we'd pass that pizza place or smelled dough somewhere, we'd exchange a look and smile, not because we ruined something, but because we reclaimed something. Respect, control, dignity. And the best part? They never laughed at us again. Monday felt different. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just quiet in a way that made everything feel settled. I woke up that morning without an alarm, without dread. Without that familiar knot in my stomach that had become normal over the last few months. For the first time since starting that pizza job, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I felt like I had already crossed the finish line. The town, though, was buzzing. In small towns, news doesn't spread through headlines. It spreads through conversations. Someone's cousin tried to order pizza. Someone's family showed up for the buffet. Someone else saw the handwritten sign taped to the door. Closed. No explanation. No apology. Just closed. For the busiest pizza place in town, that alone was shocking. For it to happen 2 days in a row? Unthinkable. People talked. They always do, at school, at the grocery store, at the arena. Did you hear the pizza place shut down all weekend? Apparently they had no dough. How do you even run out of dough? Every version of the story landed at the same conclusion. Management screwed up badly. I heard through the grapevine that corporate was furious. Weekend shutdowns aren't just embarrassing. They're expensive. Lost sales, angry regulars, broken trust. The kind of thing that gets attention from people higher up the ladder. The managers tried to blame staffing, claimed they were sabotaged. But here's the problem with that excuse. When the same 2 teenagers quit on back-to-back days using the exact same method, it stops looking like sabotage and starts looking like negligence. And negligence is harder to explain away. What stuck with me most wasn't the money they lost or the chaos they caused. It was how quickly the narrative flipped. Just days earlier, we were the joke. 2 kids who should be grateful for scraps. Kids who were laughed at for asking for fairness. Now, we were the reason their authority looked paper-thin. The reason their arrogance collapsed in on itself. Scott and I never bragged about it. We didn't have to. There's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from knowing you didn't need to shout to be heard. We just walked away and let the consequences speak for us. Every shift at the arena felt like confirmation that we'd made the right move. Clean environment. Fair scheduling. Managers who actually thanked you for doing your job. It was night and day. Every once in a while I'd think back to that laugh. The one my boss gave me when I reminded her of the promise. The one that said, "You don't matter." And I realized something important. People who laugh like that aren't strong. They're just comfortable. Comfortable thinking nothing will ever change. Comfortable believing no one below them will ever push back. They didn't lose because I was smarter, or meaner, or more vindictive. They lost because they relied on fear instead of respect. And fear only works until the moment someone stops being afraid. I never saw that boss again, but I heard enough to know that things didn't go smoothly after that. Staffing problems, increased oversight, less laughter, less swagger. Power looks different when it's questioned. Authority feels heavier when you realize it can disappear overnight. Looking back now, years later, that experience taught me more than any class ever could. It taught me that leverage doesn't always come from age or position. Sometimes it comes from simply being essential. And once you understand that, you start to see situations differently. You stop accepting disrespect as normal. You stop believing that needing a job means surrendering your dignity. That pizza place? It kept running. Businesses usually do. But something fundamental shifted. Not for them, for me. I walked away from that weekend knowing something I didn't before. That even at 15 I wasn't powerless. And neither was Scott. We were just underestimated. And underestimation is a dangerous mistake to make. Years later, I still think about that weekend sometimes. Not because of anger, not because of regret, but because of how clearly it taught me something most people don't learn until much later in life. Power isn't always loud. It doesn't always wear a title or stand behind a desk. Sometimes power is quiet. Sometimes it's a 15-year-old kid showing up on time, doing exactly what he's required to do, and nothing more. When people talk about revenge, they usually imagine yelling, confrontation, dramatic scenes. But real revenge, the kind that actually satisfies, doesn't look like that. It looks calm. It looks controlled. It looks like walking away while the other person scrambles to understand how everything slipped through their fingers. I never raised my voice. I never insulted anyone. I didn't damage property or sabotage equipment. I simply stopped giving people more than they deserved. And that was enough to expose everything wrong with how they ran that place. That boss thought control came from schedules and threats, from knowing 2 kids needed the job, from laughing when someone reminded her of a promise. What she didn't understand was that every system has a weak point. And in that pizza place, the weak point was dough. No dough meant no pizzas. No pizzas meant no business. And the only people who knew how to make it properly were the ones she underestimated. That's the part that still feels poetic. They didn't lose because we were cruel. They lost because they were careless. They built an entire operation on the assumption that we'd never push back, that we'd always show up, that we'd always comply. And when that assumption collapsed, so did their weekend. Scott and I never planned some elaborate scheme. There were no late-night strategy sessions or dramatic vows. We simply waited until we had options, until we weren't afraid anymore. And fear is the real currency in situations like that. The moment fear disappears, everything changes. Working at the arena afterward felt like stepping into the version of adulthood. People always promise you exists. Fair rules, clear expectations, mutual respect. It showed me that toxic workplaces aren't normal. They're just common. And you don't owe loyalty to people who lie to you and laugh about it. Sometimes I wonder if that boss ever connected the dots. If she ever replayed that moment in her head. The laugh, the comment about how she would have been screwed if there was no dough. The realization that the thing she joked about was exactly what happened. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But either way, the lesson landed. For me, that weekend became a quiet reference point. Anytime I felt disrespected later in life, anytime someone tried to guilt me into accepting less because that's just how it is, I remembered that pizza place. I remembered how wrong they were. And I remembered that leaving can be more powerful than staying. That's the kind of revenge that doesn't fade. Not because it hurt someone else, but because it taught you your own worth. If you're listening to this right now and you're stuck in a job, a situation, or a relationship where people laugh at your boundaries, remember this. Needing something doesn't mean you deserve disrespect. And sometimes, the most satisfying justice comes from simply letting people experience the consequences of their own arrogance. If this story hit something personal for you, smash that like button. If you've ever watched someone get exactly what they deserved without a single punch being thrown, drop a comment and tell us about it. And if you want more real, emotionally charged Reddit revenge stories that actually feel satisfying, make sure you're subscribed, 'cause the quiet ones, they're always the most brutal.